Hey. Hi, how are you?
Good, you?
Fantastic. Spring is
Cool.
here.
Nice.
We have to wait for warmer weather longer than you.
Yeah, it's pretty hot over here, but it's good.
Um, as you know, we'll start at 5 past because
Okay, cool. No problem.
um,
Sounds good.
just one moment.
Sure.
So this will actually be, if I'm not mistaken, the second to last tag observability meeting.
Then what happens?
We have been merged in, which I'm happy about, into a larger tag, like a number of tags as part of the tag reboot shuffled together and merged into tag operational resilience. So it's
Cool.
the domain of observability and analytics, but they bring in cost management, environmental sustainability, and the measuring of energy consumption and a couple of other things that make sense into a larger, more capable and resourced tag.
Okay.
Other things happen, like tag contributor strategy is now a sub project of the TOC. It looks like they've applied something that looks familiar to most who have dabbled in scaled agile or even organized engineering. So that's kind of how I look at it. So elections are happening starting yesterday for the next 2 weeks for tag chairs and co-chairs rather, and technical leads.
Okay. Sounds good. I didn't realize it was merging when you were applying for that. I didn't know that that was the intention. The Slack channel for that is pretty dead. Have
Or
you
what?
taken a look at it? Tag operational resilience.
So it's technically like in the process of being launched, which is not.
Oh, okay, got it. Because there were
So
people
that's what I mean.
joining
So like
there
the
and
tag reboot is actually
yeah.
something you're doing in
Okay.
a really intentional way, and they're slow walking it on purpose, openly, right? So that because it's not. I don't think it's a case of everyone has all the answers. It's how do we?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, the CNCF is now 10 years old. How do we set us up for the next 10 years? And we're bigger,
Yeah.
and there's not 30 projects. There's 200 and change, right? Um, and so there's a lot more people that want to contribute, and so I think they reorganized around pragmatically actionable lines versus more theoretical domain slicing, right? Which I think makes sense. In particular, now that observability is more of an attribute, right? Um, and the interesting part isn't how do we measure things in terms of where there's growth of people that can capitalize on and use the techniques. It's like, what do we want to now measure? It's like, now it's okay, it's what's the environmental impact of this and that, you know, what's the business impact of, what's the correlation to lines of business and revenue support, or sustainability of an organization, like you have not just technical stuff in your data sets, so
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, for sure.
I think the intention, at least as I've been able to understand it and observe it, is to foster cross-pollination, and people who wouldn't otherwise be in the same subspheres of the ecosystem kind of mingling more. So
Yeah.
I see it as a good thing because we have a whole bunch of like good ideas, but we haven't had in tag observability, for example, a lot of engineering work happening. A lot of that energy went to the OpenTelemetry project properly, and we ended up more talking about, well, some of the stuff we're going to talk about today. More of a platform to disseminate information and to support. I think we're going to see a big influx of new contributors who are fired up to do things.
Okay.
So yeah, and we still have to figure out how we roll everything in and capture what's in people's heads that are outgoing from the working groups across.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, we're
All
at
right.
5 minutes. Want to get rolling?
Sure, we can for
It looks
sure.
like tag observability. Oh, we have a third participant. Peng Ho. Hello hello Peng. Um,
Hi, I'm from the AWS OpenSource team. Nice to meet you
well,
guys.
Hi, nice to meet you too.
all right. Well, yeah, if you want to share, take it away. Oh, wait,
Yeah, I just wanted to.
I need to formally open this second to last meeting. This is the CNCF sponsored event. Anything you do and say in the chat needs to comply with the CNCF's code of conduct. With that, Jonah's going to talk about Jaeger 2.0.
Cool. Yeah, it's just kind of like an
Not
update.
2.0, I'll say V2.
What's that? Sorry.
I won't say specifically 2.0, I'll say V2.
Yeah, because we're already past that. We've been out for a while. So let me I'll share a few slides. It's kind of like a subset of slides that we use at KubeCon, and then with like a few updates. So I will put the link for the slides also in the chat so that if people want to see them, they can, or follow along. They're open to the public. So I just wanted to kind of go over. My name's Jonah Kowall, and my day job is I run product and design at a monitoring and observability company, but I also am a maintainer of Jaeger. And because there's other people here, I also work on OpenSearch too. So I was part of the founding team and I'm part of the technical steering committee for OpenSearch, which is another project under Linux Foundation. It has its own foundation, so sort of like a sister project to what goes on in the CNCF. And I'll talk about some of the things that we're doing. In KubeCon US November or so, we launched the first version of Jaeger version 2. We release every month, so now we're on 2.7.0 or something, or 2.6.0, but every month we come out with a new build that has changes and updates. We're currently still releasing Jaeger V1 and Jaeger V2. But we will slowly be deprecating Jaeger V1. So by the end of this calendar year, everything will only be Jaeger V2. So we don't have to build and release both of them. And we can start ripping a bunch of the code out that we don't need, which is always a good thing. Speaking of ripping code out, one of the big things we did with Jaeger V2 is to base it around an OpenTelemetry collector. So that we didn't have to maintain all of our own separate components. So prior to this, Jaeger originally had its own instrumentation, its own collector, and a few other microservice components. Over time, with OpenTelemetry becoming popular, we could deprecate all of our clients and instrumentation. And now we're kind of taking the next step, which is making our collector based on OTel. So I'm going to dig into a few details here. So the other thing that we're doing is, besides, a lot of people have asked, we got these questions recently, why can't I just use an OpenTelemetry collector and make it work with Jaeger? Well, we built a lot of other stuff around and on the collector. Examples of this include the storage APIs, which certain plugins use. And there's other components that we built around the collector, which I'll show in detail when we get into the architecture a bit more. It also lets us speak native OpenTelemetry protocol across the board instead of just on the ingestion side. And in the new configuration versus the old, we used to build separate binaries for the different components. Now we actually have one binary and you configure it via a YAML file, just like the collector. versus command line flags, which is how the old Jaeger used to work for all the config. Yeah, Matt, go ahead.
Can you just put your view to full screen?
Oh
Or
yeah, sure.
zoom in a little when we get to the yeah, thanks.
Yeah, that's fine. Sure.
This is all great news, by the way.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm thrilled, and it makes total sense. Why
yeah,
maintain things you don't need to maintain? And I'm curious what the. I'm sure you'll get into it.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, and anyone else feel free to ask questions too, because my content's only going to take 10, 15 minutes, and then we'll have lots of time. So in the binary itself, this is kind of how it looks in the OTel perspective. We use the standard OpenTelemetry protocol, Jaeger protocol, and Zipkin protocol receivers so that we have compatibility with what Jaeger supports. And then we use some standard components like the batch processor. The Jaeger storage exporter is our own because it supports multiple types of storage, which I'll mention. And we obviously have our own schema so that it's fully compatible with the previous design. So we did not change the schema, nor did we change the UI. So the APIs back to the storage, the query component is the same. Because we just didn't want to make a bunch of breaking changes on the way that works. So mostly it's kind of like the ingestion and then the entire architecture, which I'll get into in a second. To give you an idea, the config looks very familiar, just like a OTel collector. However, there's a few things that are not part of OTel. You'll notice the Jaeger storage, Jaeger query, and remote sampling. We actually donated that upstream anyway. But the two Jaeger services are implemented as extensions. So actually the entire UI, meaning exposing the service and letting you browse for traces, is an OpenTelemetry collector extension, which is kind of interesting. So the whole UI for the project is actually implemented on top of OTel. And then we obviously have our own kind of storage exporter and a few other pieces, but otherwise we include a bunch of other components to do sampling and various things. So you can use those in the config. There's just kind of like a super compressed config using in-memory storage, for example. So like when you deploy it as a user, the way that it looks is that each of these boxes, meaning the Jaeger collector role and the Jaeger query role, I'm looking for my mouse, these are basically just different config files going into the same Jaeger binary. So here it acts as a receiver. It writes the data to the database. You can obviously have lots of these collector roles. And then on the front end side, we have the query, which is the UI querying the database. So that's kind of like the basic implementation. If it's more sophisticated, you can add Kafka in there and remote sampling and a few other pieces. Kafka is often used to deal with bursty amounts of traces and let you buffer them going to your storage. We also use Flink to do some aggregation for some of the topology views, but you'll see in the roadmap we are doing some interesting things to get rid of that for some use cases. So it looks sort of more like this. The Kafka exporter and receiver are the same Kafka exporter and receiver that's part of OTel. In the past, the Jaeger implementation of Kafka had some downsides. Thankfully, the OTel implementation is a lot better. So we actually had some nice improvements because we used the upstream instead of our own, which was part of our collector. So, just to kind of talk about what's new, obviously I spent the last few minutes on OTel, so I'm not going to go into that, but we also natively support Elasticsearch 8, which we did not support for a long time. I know 9 is out. I think someone just opened an issue that they found on 9 today, but I haven't read it. And then we have a new query API, which has some other advantages if you're doing integrations. We have native support for sampling on Badger, Elasticsearch, OpenSearch. We still support Cassandra, which is the other backend, although we're thinking about deprecating it because it's just not so popular. I'll talk about the roadmap in a moment where we're actually adding another backend to that list. We have the Helm chart, a Kubernetes operator. The Kubernetes operator actually is unified now with the OTel operator. So they're basically the same operator, and it can deploy both because a lot of Jaeger is just a specialized collector. So it's kind of cool to be able to do those together. One of the other maintainers, Pavel Lafe, he's also a maintainer of OTel. He's also the main author of the operator. So he kind of helped with one of our mentorship programs to get that mentee to build kind of the new operator there, which is pretty cool. And yeah, there's a lot of other bug fixes. Every release, there's more and more things that we're fixing and improving. But yeah, there's quite a few things done on the back end side. Front end, we've improved some of the. Yeah, sure, go for it.
Yeah, if you can you expand a little on the native OTLP within Jaeger back for data structures?
Yeah, so
That sounds super interesting, and I'd love to hear more if you could expand on that.
Yeah, so we didn't change the schema, but we changed the structures in the Go pieces to basically make them look like OpenTelemetry data structures in Go. So the structs, for example.
Oh, I see.
We
So
did a lot of that. We didn't want to change the schema because that would be kind of
Yeah,
pretty
you wanted to
confusing.
reduce copies, in other words, so you've kind of adopted the same where it makes sense. I see. That's
They're
great.
sort of modified a little bit, but they are, yeah, I mean, they're basically what the collector exposed versus us having our own
Okay, so it's
structures.
you
Yeah.
haven't like expanded on or extended how one might send structured data over OTLP. It's adopted
I
the same
think we
design
have, yeah, I think we have because
or structures.
the OTel stuff is not as it doesn't have all the things that we need in them necessarily, but they are the same in terms of like most of the structure inside the code and how
Cool.
we're dealing with it. Yeah. Because Jaeger's in Go, it makes it easier too. We don't have to do anything weird with the with all of that, the data structure side.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. There's been a few enhancements. There's actually more than this because it's a little out of date. I put this together for KubeCon US, so that was KubeCon London, which was a few months ago. But we've added some additional capabilities. There's actually, if you get the release that'll be out in 2 weeks or you pulled ahead, there's actually even more changes in the graphs and visualization, which I'll get to in a second. You can also now upload, which is a cool feature if you're using Jaeger on your desktop or you're just getting used to tracing. You can actually export a trace directly with the file exporter in OTel and drag it into the Jaeger UI and it'll visualize it. So it's actually kind of a nice tool for just developers playing around with tracing, where it'll take the native OpenTelemetry file format or the JSON file format that Jaeger exports. You can send it to one of your colleagues and they can throw it in their own Jaeger UI and visualize it. And then, yes, go
That's
ahead.
a pretty cool sort of way to interact with traces on the UI rather than just finding for the trace you're looking for and ingesting it.
Yeah, and in the UI, you can export as JSON or you can export in Jaeger, but this way you could do it from the collector without even using a UI if, let's say, you're pulling it from production and you need to analyze something.
Like,
And
how
then you
did
got,
this come about? I'm just curious how the idea came about, or did somebody request it from an actual use case? It's actually, now that I think about it, I haven't
yeah,
used it, but I think about it, I like it a lot.
yeah. The JSON, I think, was for use cases. It had been in Jaeger for a long time, but because we're supporting the collector now, we just made it work with OpenTelemetry. You know, exported traces too. So, and the last one's a really cool feature. It's kind of hard to explain it, but in a trace, there's usually one set of spans where there's a performance impact. So, for example, if you have a bunch of things that are happening asynchronously, there are certain parts of the trace where if you speed up the performance, they will make that transaction faster. And there are other parts of the trace where speeding them up will have no impact on the total end-to-end performance of the transaction. And the critical path actually gives you a little black line that shows you which spans are going to impact the performance. It's kind of easier to show it. So I actually think I have it in my, KubeCon slides, which I didn't put in, so I'm just going to pull it up. Let me try this one's the newest one, because I'll just show you a little screenshot that shows it. I could pull up the UI, but it's easier.
Yeah, this is great.
Yeah, so like in this trace that we're looking at in the Jaeger UI, you'll see these little black lines. See, there's one where my mouse is that says customer, and then there are ones across all these Redis spans. And you'll see that there are some here. If you speed up these ones that are highlighted, it will shrink the transaction time, basically. So the goal here is, if I want to speed this up, I'm not going to focus on the things that are not indicated by the black line. It usually, like, here's a good example in this trace. This SQL statement is the bulk of the transaction time, or these ones down here with Redis. If I were to speed up anything else in here, it's not going to actually make an impact on the performance. So it's kind of a cool feature. No other tracing tool that I've seen really does that. And it's pretty useful because it really helps you hone in on how to speed things up. So,
How are you determining that? Like, let's say,
that's a good question.
latency for a network or something like that could be highly variable or could be completely 10x, as part of a data center upgrade or something like that. I'm kind of
Yeah,
curious, what's the
I think
predicate that you're using there, and is it tweakable or?
no, I think it's a calculation based on going through all of the spans and then understanding the timing and the parent-child
Oh,
relationships.
I'm sorry. So you're using duration in the distribution, so to speak, to
Yeah,
okay. Well,
yeah.
that makes sense. And so what's the so at what? But maybe it's a detailed topic for a different day. But like, are you looking at one standard deviation, or are you looking at a certain p-value to be the threshold by which you identify this as sort of?
I mean, I think it's more simple than that. So obviously in order to calculate the full time of the trace, you basically have to look at all the spans
Mhm.
that are basically related. And then you look at the parent-child relationship to be able to build that, call it,
Right.
waterfall view over time. And so in that view, you can basically look at where the longest pieces that sort of touch each other are and tag those as being the determining factor of the length of time
I
that the
see.
total transaction takes.
Yep. And it's
And
quick
then you
enough
just
to do
color
it
those
well.
with black, and that's basically
Yep.
what the
And
line
you
is.
can do it in the same processing pass.
Yeah,
Um, yeah,
yeah,
it makes total. Okay, cool. Thank you for explaining that.
yeah.
I love that we
But
can get
I
nerdy.
haven't looked
Thanks
at
for
the
the
code, so
question.
I don't. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was saying what we've been talking about, I believe, is what the person in chat, biology,
Okay.
had asked. So
Oh, a quick demo. Yeah. Yeah, I can do it. Just you have to give me a minute, but let me get through the last couple slides and then
I
I can
just mean you
try.
addressed the topic that was germane with the screenshots.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
yeah. Oh, yeah,
and
sure.
if I'm wrong about that, um, yeah, I'll pass.
Yeah. It's pretty easy to fire up a demo. I mean, it's really easy to do on your own, but I can show
We've
you for
got the
sure.
time if you want to take it. But
Yeah.
we didn't mean to derail, so please continue.
No, it's cool. There's only like one or two more slides and then I can fire up a demo for sure. Um, So roadmap on some of the things, I've modified this because I'm talking about some of the things that are actually coming out in a couple of weeks when we do our regular monthly release. But um, one of the big things we're working on is officially supporting ClickHouse. A lot of people interested in it.
Mhm.
Really great compression, easy to stand up, much lighter on the infrastructure than some of the other options.
Speaking from experience, much simpler to manage and run with fewer moving parts. Works great as part of a pod spec. Yeah,
Well, like in the case where I'm going to fire
or
up the
deployment
demo,
spec, I'm sorry.
yeah, that's running in memory, and that's an option if you're not, if you
Mhm.
don't want to keep traces for a huge amount of time. We have lots of other options that are even more lightweight than ClickHouse, but ClickHouse has really good compression and scales well. So we're going to add that as an official support.
Yeah, I'll also interject that a nice advantage of that too is, and I am not talking about any company in particular, but I'll say in the over 1,200 CNCF um, uh, uh, space of vendors, there are many folks that can help end users and customers
Yeah,
deploy and manage ClickHouse. So it's accessible broadly, is what
sure.
I'll say.
I mean, the concern is obviously like any company that controls an open source project, there's lots of room for future challenges with licensing in the project. Personally, as someone that works on OpenSearch, I always say that that's the safest bet because OpenSearch will always be open source. It will always be part of a software foundation. And OpenSearch is also nice because it provides a user interface that can read Jaeger traces. So they understand our schema in OpenSearch.
Yeah.
And you can use it for logging too, which a lot of other people will ask us, well, I need logging and I need metrics, and Jaeger only does traces. So what should I do? And it's like, well, you can use Prometheus and you can use
Mhm.
OpenSearch and you can use Jaeger, and that'll give you what you need pretty much.
Yeah, I think I should be clear. I think I may have buried the lead. My point was that in the end user space within the
Yeah,
CNCF, umbrella, companies that use a lot of CNCF projects like Jaeger, it also just when you look at the distribution of deployed things, there are existing people who already have ClickHouse deployed
yeah,
because
for sure.
of its
And
attributes,
Elasticsearch and
this
OpenSearch. Yeah,
and all the things,
yeah,
and
yeah,
so I think this just kind of
yeah,
I love that this is like a pragmatic admission of reality, right? And saying like, hey, we want to get the project out there and in use
yeah,
because it has all this value
for
and
sure.
benefit. And then for some people that are already using ClickHouse, bam, it makes it an easy win because it's not standing up a new storage platform or a new
Right,
thing that would
right.
be harder in practice to just
Yeah.
do. So that's a nice mature thing to I think for the project to do to look at what's
Yeah, and that's why we're kind of
the
like
real
moving
workloads.
away from Cassandra because it's just less and less people use it, less and less
Mhm.
people care about it. And so it's just, one less thing that we have to
Yeah.
officially support. So, yeah.
May I ask a
Um,
follow-up question?
yeah,
We
sure.
we are seeing in the Jaeger V2 you support Elasticsearch, and I think OpenSearch is on the roadmap but not implemented yet.
Oh, no, we support OpenSearch. We have
Okay.
for quite some time. Yeah, yeah.
The other question is for the Jaeger. I'm new to the Jaeger. I don't know whether Jaeger have some compliance tests or performance tests for the backend. I mean, I know OpenSearch and the ClickHouse is just a backend for the Jaeger, and I'm not sure is any some benchmark framework to test from Jaeger perspective to test the backend. and from the compliance perspective or from performance perspective?
We do basically when we do our builds and release, every time we do a build, which is basically when people check in code, we verify functionality. We don't do any performance testing or anything like that. It's just not really something that the team wants to take on per se. I mean, we're a graduated project and there are 5 of us that are maintainers and we all have day jobs. None of us work on Jaeger full-time by any stretch. So we do what we can. I wouldn't want to take on performance testing. But
so this is actually, it's weird to say I'm happy to hear this, but one of the initiatives that's been proposed in the new, as part of the reboot of tags, there's a whole bunch of initiatives that came out of KubeCon in Europe recently. And one of the ones that I've been following and thinking on is a sort of a compliance kit. Compliance, I'm not evoking the security sort of version of that noun, but a way for someone to say, hey, I want to try a project like Jaeger. I want to run it in my own accounts on my own, whatever I've got. But I need to understand what should I expect this to cost, and what's some way that I can, know if it's working, because it costs me to figure out if it's working. So if I want to quickly try something, how can I run a conformance might be a better way, conformance for the hardware or the cloud resources or the, whatever I've got that I'm testing this project with. And so solving this challenge is something that all projects and as an example, Jaeger's a graduated project. There are sandbox and incubation projects that have even far less resourcing already, but want to be able to say, as part of just the project, easy button to see what it is and how it works in their own environments. What should it cost, and what are the requirements going to be? And part of that is benchmarking, different backends and making that a toolkit that a project like Jaeger could use without having to implement and manage themselves. And so this is just confirmation that initiative is something that makes sense to do broadly, not just in observability and analytics, but across all of the other domains. So,
yeah, makes sense.
So stay tuned, I guess. And if you're interested, I think there's going to be a big call for contribution coming out in a few weeks as the dust settles from the elections for TAG co-chairs and leads that are happening as part of the whole restructuring and pivoting for growth.
Cool. Yeah, so one of the other things that we're doing that is kind of relevant for the bottom half of this slide is we do quite a bit of work with both the Google Summer of Code internship program and the LFX mentorship program. And we work really closely with those organizations to work on bigger parts of the project for us. So for example, we're currently starting to take applications to do the React upgrade. We've done a lot of existing work with mentorships. We're building a new public demo environment where you'll actually be able to go and use Jaeger, use the OpenTelemetry demo, and use Hot Rod, which is like a Jaeger demo application using OTel, because there's no public place to see what OpenTelemetry does and how you use Jaeger. You can stand it up on your own really easily, which I'm going to show you in the demo. But just having a URL someone can hit and go and play with this stuff and see it, I think is pretty cool. So hopefully we'll get that one done in the next few months as one of our mentorships, like setting up all the automation and the Kubernetes setup and everything. And thanks to Oracle for donating infrastructure for us to be able to actually run that, which is really nice for a project to not have to pay for that ourselves, because we all have real jobs. And yeah, we're doing, we're going to kind of extend some of those upgrades we talked about to, make the UI more OpenTelemetry native, because it still uses some terminology from Open Tracing, because that was the API and standard when Jaeger was created. But there's also some really nice improvements in visualization and topology, which you'll see hitting on the next release. But yeah, there's lots of other things we want to do in the roadmap. I think that's my last slide. I was just mentioning the mentorships. Actually, I created this one yesterday, but yeah, we're always kind of building new things thanks to the Linux Foundation and Google for the mentorship programs and trying to get people involved. All of us maintainers are getting older and we need more people to come and contribute. We have a new maintainer that's younger than all of us that joined recently he works at Bloomberg. And we're kind of just trying to get more people involved in the project and the community. It's always a struggle.
So I know you don't represent either of the it was Google Summer of Code or the LFX, but there's a lot of acronyms. Do you want to, and we do have a few minutes still, do you want to expand a little bit and tell people what they are and how they work? I'm familiar with both programs. I've been engaged in one of them myself.
Yeah.
In the past. But I think common knowledge isn't so common unless we talk about it. So
Sure. Yeah, we
it
can.
might make sense to spend a couple minutes there and just elaborate on how they work in practice with the project and how might want to engage. I can use that as a segue to, as you know, for 5 years now. And again, this is our second to last meeting formally under this umbrella. I always ask, what's the best way to engage in the project? If this is part of your nerditude, and if you want it to be, and you wanted to engage and learn and contribute, where would they go? Do you have regular meetings? And maybe weave that into what does it mean to be part of either of those programs?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and I'll talk a little bit about like how we work with them.
Thank you, by the way, for the presentation.
Sure.
This is really
no
I can't
problem.
wait to go play with some of this stuff myself.
Cool.
Mention a couple things that are coming soon that are also exciting.
And definitely like this is where you can find us, and on the Slack is always a good option. But let me show you a little bit on the mentorship side, just so you can sort of see how this works. So this is sort of like our internal, I'm going to just share a document so you can view, so you can kind of see like how it works and what we do internally between mostly two of us, me and Yuri, who's the creator of Jaeger. We tend to do a lot of the mentorship type stuff. So we kind of have like a tracker that we use when we're going to open issues. So specifically the way that these typically work is we will, for example, the mentorship term that we just finished, which is term 1, it runs from March to May. We basically open an issue. So I'm going to show you an example of the issue that we opened for term 1. And we basically, open a project proposal. The mentee submits basically to the project. And then we notify the person that actually gets awarded it. The mentorships, the way that they work is that they're typically for people just getting started earlier in their career, and they get paid for the time that they spend. So in this case, this runs for a few months and they make, a few $1,000s. I think it varies based on the mentorship and all of that. Oops, sorry. I thought that was a link back to the, so like, for example, the storage upgrade that we did. This is just looking for, sorry, I'm looking for the original. Yeah, this explains the mentorship. So one of the programs we do is the Linux Foundation, and there's kind of a lot of details about the mentorship on the LFX site and kind of how you get involved in it. They have nice software that lets us, as the mentees, have access to what's going on. The mentors apply, and they basically can get selected to work on things. We meet with them every week as part of the mentorship and, just help them move things forward, make sure all the questions are answered. in the proposals, they get pretty detailed, where we actually, you know, for example, the ones that we're just finishing up, like, for example, the UI, we kind of do a weekly update on what they're working on, where the challenges are. You know, we are regularly in touch with them and like help them go through the work to be able to contribute. In their proposals, they provide pretty detailed understanding of the problem. They provide a detailed way that they're going to approach the problem, how they're going to break down their time. We sometimes get, you know, 50 plus proposals that we have to sort through and we have to look at. We look at where they contribute in other open source projects, where they contribute in Jaeger, and then we select the mentee, that kind of gets awarded and that we work with, you know, pretty regularly on this stuff. So, what else can I say? The programs are a little different, but similar, like Google Summer of Code sort of works the same way. We participate in both programs. You know, this is the Google Summer of Code one where it's just starting. Technically, it starts next week, but we already started it. So, and this is kind of the timeline in the background. So, yep. And yeah, we're working on some new ones now for some of the new projects. So, yeah, we're always kind of doing this because we get a lot more out of it for the time we put in and try to get more people involved in the project. So it's a good use of time.
Awesome.
Yep. It's a bit slow, you know, I mean, but to get big things done, it works. I mean, I would say that 75% of Jaeger 2 was written through mentorship programs over a 2-year period. I ended up writing a lot of the documentation and a lot of the other stuff, but some of the bigger chunks of Jaeger V2 were written by the mentorship program, and we just do the code review and help them out and, you know, just unblock things. And
so you're actually, I mean, this is what building community looks like. Do you find that some, I would imagine now I don't know how many mentorships have you done in Jaeger in total? Do you have that number? I'm actually curious, but I would imagine some of them come back to the project and form part of your regular as well.
Some will contribute after I started doing these probably. I got more involved in these maybe 1.5 to 2 years ago. But I don't know if they were doing them longer than that, because I've only been a maintainer for about 2 years, I would say, something like that. And I think we did some of that before. And I know some of our previous maintainers were doing the outreachy. Do you remember that one?
I do.
Program, which I think is another mentorship program. So I know we did some of those in the past, but we don't do outreachy anymore. We just do these two for now. And honestly, I don't think we could take on more mentorship. So this is working for us, and you know, the programs are great, but previous maintainers, you probably know Gerasi from OpenTelemetry. He's one of the maintainers there. He was doing a lot of outreachy stuff with Jaeger previously, but he's not doing that so much now.
Cool. Yeah. I guess lastly on how to engage, like, do you have monthly meetings or do you do Slack? Like, what's the culture like of the Jaeger project?
So I mean,
of course, out of 5 you said maintainers, but are there?
Yeah, I had the last slide that had that. I'm just looking for the right presentation now. But we can so basically the easiest place is Slack, hashtag Jaeger on the CNCF. And then we do have monthly meetings. They're actually linked right on the top of the channel. We just had one last week. But Slack seems to work really well for people asking questions, how do they get started? We get a lot of, what's a good first issue? It's like, well,
Yeah.
web page
Well,
that
so some of
explains
these
that.
questions are because many of the guests we've had, I say guests as if it's a TV show. I mean, many of the projects that have come to talk about their work have been in the sandbox and or incubation phases. We've had
Yeah.
fewer observability focused graduated projects. So I think
Yeah.
interesting to see what are the needs of the project. So as I said, there's always two questions that I ask. Well, one is how can folks new to all of this that may have just found this video for the first time, and that's their first,
Sure.
oh, this is a whole community. How can they engage in the project? And the second is what does the project need, or
Yeah.
or what would be awesome for the project to have?
Yeah.
Not to be too terse about it, but from the CNCF or from other companies that might want to invest in the form of time.
Yeah. So right on our homepage, we have a how you get involved.
Mhm.
And there's lots of ways to get involved in the project. A lot of, just whether you want to get started with coding or you don't want to code, there's lots of things that, that we need help with. But in the repository, we explain if you want to get started and you want to learn the project, it's always good to go for a good first issue, and that's explained right here. This link will actually just bring you to, things that are in tracing in our org that are basically tagged as good for first issues. And people can kind of start tackling those to learn the code base. But there's also like help wanted, which is a little more complex sort of features that, that
It require planning and
yeah,
careful
yeah,
approach
that are
that's
going to be a
nuanced
bit bigger,
and thoughtful.
probably. So,
Mhm.
but yeah, for sure. So
Cool.
we also have contributing guidelines that like go into exactly how you should do it, how you should do the testing, what type of tests you should write, pretty detailed explanation of that. And same with, setting up your development environment and various other things here. So there's like, pretty sure there's a good one that like explains how to set up your development environment and everything else. It's pretty straightforward. So we try to have kind of good, I'm just looking for it, contributing. Yeah, I think it's actually, oh yeah, it's actually in the same how to contribute is
I think
basically
this
the,
is a good case study. So another one of the initiatives that we're noodling on is a badging and capabilities framework that projects can use to say, hey, we have extensive docs on how to get started.
yeah,
Just like you might say, hey, we have tracing or logging. There was an issue number 199 in tag observability that we've had for a while for a badging system, so that projects could say, I have profiles or I have distributed tracing, I support LP, whatever. But the same is needed as a general framework for a general framework is what's been proposed as this kind of thing is needed in other domains. One of them is documentation, right? So this is, I think, I'm going to flag this to go look at, but well done. It's cool to see, as a project matures all the way to the graduated phase, it gets really, the barrier to entry becomes easier, not harder, which is a bit counterintuitive to maybe pop culture references of open source development and whatnot. They truly are open communities. So thanks for walking us through some of this as well.
Sure. So no point in doing a demo, I guess, unless someone wants to see something, I can fire it up, but
Demo. Okay. Actually, I'm not even sure if what you had walked through in the slides briefly answered the original question around.
yeah. I mean, I can show you how easy it is to set it up if you want to just see really quick. I'll just show you. So there's just I'm on Windows, but this is just my Linux WSL. So I checked out my fork of Jaeger, but this is basically like if you just check out the code base in, and you want to essentially stand up, let's say our hot rod demo. We have a few different demos here. in examples directory, there's basically a few different examples. We also have other ones in Docker. So in Hot Rod specifically, if I just do Docker compose up here, this will basically create the containers. And then I'm going to go back into my browser and I'll show you, we'll be able to easily run the demo. So that's how easy it is. I'm pretty sure you can also do it without checking it out, but I like to be able to modify the container and stuff like that. So let me share this screen back out. And then there's two in the Hot Rod demo, there's two, oops, sorry, that's different one. It's on localhost. That's the Jaeger UI, and this is the Hot Rod demos on 8080. So in here, we basically have like an Uber, like a fake Uber, like I want to dispatch a car to pick me up in Rachel's floral designs. So I'm just going to run a bunch. These all obviously create traces every time I click on them. So this is like running a bunch of transactions, and the traces are obviously being picked up by Jaeger. I can actually open them right from here. If I wanted to see that last one I just opened, I can click on it and it actually will just pull it up. But the other way to look at it is just in the Jaeger UI. I can basically look at all the traces. These are kind of all the things I was just clicking on. And then I can drill into the trace and kind of look at the issues, like this database issue here, drill into it, see the query, like where it went. And yeah, so it's really simple to stand it up and play with it. You can actually send your own traces to the same setup, but it's very lightweight and straightforward. So, and here's the critical path that you can hover over. So it's kind of showing me that that's where it is. You'll notice it's only on like some of these spans where there's a little black line, but yeah. That's kind of how simple it is.
All
To
right.
run it on your
Thank you.
machine.
Thank you.
Don't need much. Yeah, cool.
All right. Well, if there are no other questions, I don't think we have anything else on the agenda to talk
Okay.
about. At least in
There
the negative 3 minutes we have.
yeah. Okay, those all got answered. Never mind. I'm just catching up on the chat because I wasn't seeing it from when I was sharing stuff, but okay, cool.
Cool.
Sounds good.
All right.
Thanks.
Well, thank you very much. And I'm looking forward to that release.
Yeah, and we'll see you in the new tag when that comes out, and hopefully good luck in your election, Matt.
Oh, yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think it's going to be cool to see all these communities get smashed together, Super Collider style. I think I think observability bridges all of these other domains.
Yeah.
Now and helps them do what they're focused on.
Yeah.
So
Awesome.
Yeah, we'll have to see how everything shakes out.
All right. Thanks. Talk to you soon.